Welcome back to the Broadcast Ops Playbook. This show is for teachers building student-led broadcast and media programs and trying to do it without the chaos, burnout, and juggling 10 different tools. I'm your host, Taylor Siebert, and over the last 2 episodes, we've taken a little bit of a break for some events, but hopefully you're still with us. We've talked about roles and accountability, giving students something concrete to own in the broadcast program, and building a system where students hold each other to the standard. Now we're going to be talking about, as you've maybe already seen on the title, the thing every teacher asks us about first, which is gear and equipment. It's exciting, it's fun, but here's the scenario we usually see and run into is you get approved for new equipment. Maybe you wrote a grant and you got the money. Maybe your AD or principal said, yep, go ahead and get it ordered. And don't get me wrong, we sell equipment, so we love it. But you buy the cameras, you get a switcher, you get the wireless transmitters, and then nobody knows how to set it up. Nobody knows what connects to what. You're reading the manual during a live broadcast. Been there, done that. And you've got $5,000 worth of equipment and the same chaos you had before, just with more cables. So this episode, it's not an anti-gear episode. Gear is very important, but gear without a system to support it is just expensive stuff collecting dust in your closet. So today we're talking about why starting small actually scales faster and how to think about gear as a progression instead of a shopping list and getting it all at once, and why training is the step that everyone skips. So let's get into it. All right, episode 6, we're closing out what we call the systems arc, which is roles, accountability, and now we're talking about gear. And Hoosier, I know you actually went to our community, Future Ready Educators. If you're not in there, please join. And you asked a question, right? You ran a poll asking teachers what the single piece of gear that made the biggest difference in your broadcast. And I'd love for you to share the results with everyone as we get started in this episode.
Yeah, well, one of the best things is we kind of plan these episodes out in advance, and so I thought, hey, you know what? We've got an active community of teachers, and I was like, let's just go ask them. And so able to do some polling before instead of after. And yeah, I think the biggest thing that they said was that crew communication systems were the biggest unlock for their program. Quite frankly, it makes a lot of sense. To be able to communicate with everyone on your team, I mean, it's the biggest, it's one of the 4 C's. It's one of the biggest things that, we encourage students to learn how to properly communicate. And especially, we've got programs that are multiple cameras. And so a lot of that, the coordination between cameras, the coordination between graphics and the announcers and everything that has to happen, wireless communication is just the way to go, or crew communication. It doesn't have to be wireless, but it's a big game changer. And I think the second, we even had some teachers say, we only have 1 camera, but just putting kids on a headset with other people makes the role not feel isolated. You're actually part of a team. It's kind of like, when you huddle up in football, instead of just being one of 11, you are in the group of 11. You're all talking to each other. And then you go out and you execute your role. And that's kind of what we're doing with, the crew communication. We are talking together and we're executing on our roles.
I think it makes the game not that the game goes slow, but makes it go fast, and it keeps the students engaged in their role. And that's what we're going to unpack today, because the gear that matters most isn't always what you'd expect. And so we always think cameras or, better camera equals better program. And there is something to that. Having a really nice camera, we know the difference. We did that at state basketball. We talked about borrowing some of Marcus's XF605s. But as you just heard from Hoosier, a lot of our community who do have some established programs, it's something I wish I would have known when we started. I'm sure same with you, said communication changed everything. So that tells you something about some of maybe where the gaps are with that. So I want to talk about why gear without system is kind of sometimes a disappointment to schools. And we've actually heard from schools who've bought thousands of dollars of equipment and it literally sits in the closet. And we call it the gear trap. The teacher thinks if we just have better cameras, or we have a better computer or whatever that thing is that they think is going to improve their program, the broadcast will be better. An admin thinks, well, we invested in all of this equipment, we spent all this money, so the program should improve. But both are wrong, because without a system underneath, it's going to fail. The equipment literally will be sitting in your closet. Gear amplifies what you already have. And if you have a system, you have roles, checklists, accountability, training, gear makes it better. And if you have chaos, gear makes the chaos more expensive. So you got to knock some of those things out before you start to think about, oh, we should be adding this, this, and this. And we have some programs who maybe have gone the non-traditional route and done that and then figured out the system later. So it can be done, but this podcast is built so that you don't have to go through that pain. And so a second camera may not help if nobody knows, if you don't know who's going to actually operate it. So let's do multicam, right, Hoosh? Well, what if you don't have the students in place to do multicam? Or a video switcher doesn't help if nobody knows what shot to call. There's some training involved in switching, which we have a certification for that. Wireless transmitters don't help if you don't have crew communication figured out. And we have had schools buy multiple cameras and try to do, in fact, I was at a school the other day and they don't have headsets. So their camera guy is down there on an island hoping and wishing that their camera shot is showing up on the stream. So here's where programs get stuck. We created something called the Next Level Broadcast Guide, and it maps 5 levels of a broadcast program. And I'm going to share that with you as Hoosier kind of dives into some of these things. And you guys are going to get this guide accompanied with listening to this, or you can download it and listen to it later. And so level 1 is what we call the foundation. It's 1 camera, a scoreboard, overlay, some advertising. That's it. Level 5 gets you to the premium. It's the pro studio. You've got a fiber network, NDI, you've got a control room. But the problem is most programs haven't mastered level 1, and they think they should start buying level 3 equipment, and they see the full progression and try to jump levels. And so this kind of gives you a good idea. There's some questions in here. You maybe see what ESPN or Fox does, and you try to recreate that in a high school gym. And most of the time, it doesn't work. Have you seen a school buy gear before they were ready? And I'd love for you to share what happened in that scenario.
Yeah, definitely have had a few schools that have reached out, and we start to work with them. And as I start to communicate with them, they're like, okay, so we have all of this gear. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, this, I tell the teacher, I'm like, I'm going to be honest with you, this is going to be a lot. If you try to use all of this right away, that's when we start to see early burnout. A lot of it, they get the equipment, like you said, they don't have the students, and then the equipment just sits. If you're at a small school and you maybe have 10 students, there's a lot of high schools around where I am that are kind of like this. There's only about 10 or so students in the program. Well, to properly do a multicam stream, for us, it takes 7 to 8 students. Well, if out of your 10, 3 of them are in the sport, they're still a part of the program, but they have to be on the court playing or on the field, and then 1 or 2 have work or they're sick or they can't show up, all of a sudden you're down to a team of probably 4 on an actual night, being realistic. And I'm like, okay, multicam will not work. You need at least 1 announcer, you need someone running your producing, and you need someone running a camera, and so you only have 1 other person. And so what are you going to do? Are you going to combine roles? And it gets chaotic. And then I check back in with the school at the end of the season, and it's like, so yeah, that multicam switcher we bought from you, yeah, it just kind of stayed in the closet. I'm like, well, not going to argue that we made the sale, but I warned you. I tried to tell you that it just might not be feasible.
Yeah. And we have experienced this, especially this time of year. It's springtime and budgets are being put together. There's budget pressures that make it worse. And so schools sometimes run on a, hey, use it or lose it budget. So teachers feel pressure that got to get all this gear, get a list, and got to spend it before the fiscal year ends. So they buy a bunch of gear that they maybe don't even need yet. and then they have equipment they can't support and a budget that won't come back for the training or systems that would actually make the gear useful. So, all right, that's kind of, why gear without systems really disappoints. We're going to dive into now, why does this keep happening? And Hoosier, I'd love for you to dive into, got a couple points here on why.
Yeah, I think the first reason that it keeps happening is when you're trying to prove that your program is worth funding and worth keeping around, you start to look for the tangible things. You start to look for the visible things. What can I visibly show somebody that says, "Hey, this program is thriving"? Well, you bring in $80,000 worth of equipment, and someone's like, "Well, somehow you got the money to fund that, and so you probably got a good program." Well, if you don't use it, it doesn't matter, right? And so I think there's a lot of kind of maybe outward appearances that are trying to be kept up. And so, when your admin walks around, yeah, it's easy to show them a new camera, but it's hard to kind of explain to them the importance of, like, we just did a call yesterday for our spring sprint where we helped teachers document what we call standard operating procedures, or an SOP. It's hard to show them that document and say, this is actually the real game changer, because sometimes it just doesn't correlate in people's heads, especially those that haven't actually done a broadcast. It's tough to show them, here's what our crew communication was like before the operating procedures, and then we put these in place, and now the teacher shows up to the game and the students are taking charge of it, and they're in control. And sometimes that's hard to show, versus, hey, we're streaming in like really high quality 1080 instead of fuzzy 720, to YouTube or wherever your destination is. So yeah, gear feels like progress, whereas the documentation is like, oh, you're just, kind of on that foundation, but you got to have a strong foundation before you start building on top of it. The teachers don't know what they don't know with the budgets being due. And so, actually, in my email inbox right now, I've got about 2 or 3 different requisition requests to get some gear and some numbers to teachers. And I've already done about 5 before these. And so teachers get to this point and they're like, well, I got to get this into the office. And so they just send me like a wish list. And I'm like, okay, this is great. If you can get it, that's fantastic. But how are we going to use it? And are you sure that this is the piece that you actually want? Are you going to just buy multiple cameras before you even buy the switcher? Because then if you don't have the switcher, it doesn't matter if you have multiple cameras. You can only, get in a certain few. And so I think that there are those things, like we've explained it many times to our teachers, but jumping from one camera to your second camera is going to be probably the most expensive jump you make, because you have to get all of the other tools in place with that second camera. You have to get your switcher. If you don't have crew communication by then, you have to get that. And you have to have, you buy another tripod, you get another zoom control. You just have to buy all of these extra things. It's not just, we're going to buy a $1,500 camera and it's good. You got to get it into a system. You have to then have another student who knows how to direct. You got to get them trained so they know what they're doing. And that I'm just, barely
Rattling off just top of the head things.
I know.
Yeah.
Just barely getting in there. And it's like, that's why we made our equipment guide, because we realized that we have learned by going through the fire of trying to do it and being like, oh, this is a little bit larger investment than we thought. And so that's why we've made that gear progression map, because we really want teachers to go into this as informed as they can be. And the only way that you can really be informed is by people with experience like us. And so, yeah, that multi-camera production, as you look there, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're not, it'd be an excellent time to find us on YouTube.
Well, I brought this up because, multicam is actually level 3 for us. And this is based on just our experience and working with schools and going, it takes a lot more. It's not a level 2 or level 1 to go to multicam. It takes a lot of thought process to go, because there's added roles to what your students are doing. And so, how important do you think we've done a lot of training. How important is it to have training before adding new gear? And what's the difference you've seen between schools that maybe have done the training on their equipment and the ones that have not?
Yeah, the most obvious example is probably a school that doesn't have training on multicam productions. And another thing that we're seeing too is that there are just students who don't watch traditional sports broadcasts. And so it's difficult for them to understand how to switch multicam if they've never seen it. I've been fortunate to grow up watching sports on TV, and so I know that when the action is going on the field, we stay on the main camera. And then when the play is over, we then cut to a different camera to show the reaction. Well, we've had students before show up to our state event before our training was as great as it is now, and there's still room for improvement, but there would be students that middle of the play, they'd cut to the floor camera, and I'm sitting there looking like, what in the world ever inspired you to do that? Well, I realized they don't know what they don't know, right? They thought it was acceptable. They thought, hey, this camera's closer. We should cut to this. And it's like, okay, we need to put up the guardrails. We need to give you the rules, not the rules of engagement, but we need to give you the rules of a broadcast and what you can and can't do. And I remember talking to Marcus Shear from Johnson County Central at one point, and his big thing is he likes to teach all of the rules of a broadcast and then tell students that there are a few times that you can creatively break these rules.
Hmm.
But only after you've mastered the actual rules can you then have the freedom to try and break a few. And there's very special circumstances for that.
Yeah, I think I've even seen students switch camera shots with the ball mid-air and thinking, you just get trigger happy. And so without that training piece, a lot of this equipment, it doesn't make your broadcast look better. It actually makes it look worse if you don't have the proper training in place to do that. So I wanted to share a little bit before we move on to the next section too, just some of the questions we have here in the guide to ask yourself if you're at level 1. I've got 2 screens here, so I'm going to look over to the other one here. So you're to identify which level you are currently at. And so these are really some great questions to ask. So if you're level 1, you have 1 camera and you can stream a game. You are level 1. Level 3, you've got 3 cameras, you got a director, you've got wireless, you've got student rotating roles and they train each other, you got crew communications. Maybe you're ready for level 4, which for us is adding instant replay. Your equipment's really organized. Maybe you've got a hoop camera, some of those fun things that a lot of people maybe skip to level 4 and skip 2 and 3 and go straight to that and add it all at once. So, and if you can check all those, maybe you're ready for level 5. And so we understand gear is really important, but there's just a lot of things you need to consider. And one of the things that we have that can help you with that is our student certifications so that you can get that training. And maybe that's at the same time you get the gear, or maybe you've had it already and now you want to get some of that training. We can help. And it just takes reps. It takes reps and getting students hands-on practice. And that's why the workshop we did at Nixa last week, if you're watching this here in April, we did a workshop at Nixa last week, which was all hands-on for students. And we just need to get them more reps outside of when that game is live. Getting them those reps in class is really key. So, okay, let's talk about the how and starting small and scaling. How do you scale your program to where maybe a Jordan Burns is at or Marcus? They've all told us that's not where they started. They started small. So let's break that down for them.
Yeah, I think there's 5 things to walk through here. And I think the first thing is whatever level you're at, get as close to mastery at that as you can. Because, and I wanted to say this a little earlier, but I'll say it now because it still fits. As you expand and grow and get more stuff, the amount of things that can go wrong grows exponentially. And so you
we know that from experience. We've got stories for you on that.
As we do larger and larger setups, really pushes my brain to figure out what in the world is going wrong now. It's just the silliest things. And so, like, if you're thinking about a production room and having something like, you got to have network IT knowledge. I mean, it grows exponentially. And so that's why we don't have a whole lot of schools that have it, but they're growing to it. And so master your current level before you add anything. And I think that goes for anything in life. So just
Yep.
general life advice as well. It, if you if you don't know how to set up, if your students don't know how to set up the tripod and the camera, and they don't know that this HDMI cord goes into here, and they don't know the flow, and they don't know how to break it down without you, let's not add anything new, right? As fun as it might be, but like let's get the students trained up. And if that involves training you as well, like let's do that. And we're happy to work with you to do that. Um, so so master that. And if you have at your current level, then go to number 2. And as you get the gear, don't expect to plug it in right away. So last summer, we were able to work with Metro Nashville Public Schools, and we got them a lot of gear. And so they went from a lot of schools nothing to that big, large, expensive gear. And we went down to train them for an entire week. And I think the thing that I said the most was don't expect to do it all at one time, because it's a lot. And you haven't even, for our schools here in Nebraska that we work with a lot, they've all started the one laptop, the one camera,
Yeah.
simple. They've gotten that down. They've done that for years. But these schools were going to go straight into at least 2 cameras, the TriCaster system. They'd had the 3-play, the replay system by VizRT. And I just sitting there like, we're going to fire hose you with information this week. And you're going to probably forget half of it. And that's okay, because here's my phone number.
Yeah.
If we're going to work with you, and we can do Zoom calls and however much we need to get it installed. But this is a lot. And so you need to train your students before you expect to put it out on game day, just because it takes a lot of work. So that's number 2, train before you deploy.
Yeah, and I want to share a little bit as we kind of talk through how do you go through that progression. And that was a great example of Metro. They did skip 1, 2, and 3 and went straight to 4. But they deployed training with it. And they also had an expectation to the teachers. They said, hey, we know this isn't going to be perfect to start. It wasn't like, hey, this is going to be ready, first football game. It was like, hey, let's take this school year and we just want to practice, get the kids hands-on experience with this equipment. And we work with them for a long time to get to that place. And so there are exceptions to skipping levels if there is that training piece. But I want to show, kind of cues up the third item is like, how do you know when to go to the next level? And so in this PDF, we put, systems needed at level 2. So there's going to be some new roles. You have to have announcers, maybe an audio person, graphics. You need to know how to pronounce names and prepare. There's a lot more that goes into this. We've even included the brand names that we rep for the equipment that you need. So Hoosier mentioned the Zoom controller is really important, a soundboard, Audio Technica headsets, and then training, audio levels, practicing graphics, queuing, announcer, just practice. We have a certification for that. Those are the systems needed at level 2. And this is just really high level. This isn't in the weeds. You can work with us and we can really build this out for you. And then a little pro tip. So audio quality is absolutely, I would say camera is pretty close, but if your audio isn't good on a broadcast, especially if you have announcers, Hoosier, would you agree? That's the number one thing your viewers are going to notice. You need to have those Audio Technica headsets. They're great.
Yeah, I spend more time when we're doing our setups worrying about how the audio sounds than worrying about how the cameras look. And part of that is we've been able to fortunate to upgrade to nice cameras, but cameras are cameras, right? You turn them on, you get the color and the brightness right, and you go with it. Audio, as someone who's doing a musical here this weekend, audio's a bear, and so don't move on before that. And then we've had some viewers call and say, hey, the audio is just off and I have muted my TV, so please help this school. And I'm like, I get it. But yes, there are a lot of people that they would rather mute the game than listen to bad audio, regardless of how talented the student calling. Like, and that's the thing.
Right.
You might have a really talented announcer who actually knows what they're talking about, but if they're all distorted or they're too quiet or too loud, like, people are just going to turn it off. It doesn't matter how entertaining or good they are at announcing. If it doesn't sound good and clear, it's a tough listen.
Yep. So number one was master your current master your current level. 2, train before you deploy. Now 3, let's go through, once you walk through the levels here, to plan your upgrades.
Yeah, so level 1 is the foundation, right? We talked about it. The one camera, the scoreboard overlay, and integrating some advertisers and sponsors, especially if you have to pay for your program. That's a great way to make some money back and give kids real world experience in selling the advertising. You can use very basic camcorders. I mean, we've listed the Canon XA60. It is a 4K, technically a 4K camera. It's not your big broadcast camera, but it's capable of that, and it looks very good, and it's reliable and student friendly. Pair it with a tripod capture card, you're good to go. Like, that's as simple as it is, and that's how I started. When I started in high school, we had one laptop, one camera, and we actually didn't have an audio board at the time. I just had like a gaming headset for $25, plugged it in, and started calling. And I tweaked it to make it sound good, but that was the next upgrade we made when I was a student is, all right, let's get an actual soundboard so I sound good. So speaking of upgrading, then that was level 2. So we started working more with audio. We added me, an audio mixer, and then we started working on some graphics like, hey, what can we show in between breaks? How can we highlight our school with some graphics? And then even some in-game stuff. How do we, put up stats or starting lineups? All of the different things like that. And honestly, the world of graphics is a large world. Like, it's almost its own. Audio is its own thing. Video is its own thing. Graphics is completely separate from video, but they all work together. Here's maybe a football reference. You have your offense and defense for football, and that's your video and your audio, and then you have your graphics, which are like your special teams unit.
Hey, I like
They're
it, dude. Dropping the analogy.
I know. I thought of that here on the spot, so I think it's pretty good. You don't always have to have graphics, but in key moments in the game, they can be really big. They can be a special teams player right there and make a big play. And there's just so much to it. You can have lower thirds, you can have stats, you can have a full screen takeover. I mean, there's just so much to it. And so graphics, honestly, is probably its own episode. And so that's kind of level 2. Level 3, we talked about multicam production. Again, when you get into this, you actually have to buy a video switcher. You've got to get, if you have multiple cameras and you want to put one on the floor, you're into, wireless video transmitters. We've got some great, considerably low-cost options for the quality of transmission that they provide, either working with Swit or Hollyland. And then you've got to have an intercom system. And even for the musical that I'm doing, we're all in one booth. We're still going to put on an EarTech intercom system. We're actually going to borrow the school's broadcasting head, their crew communication,
Nice.
mainly because, it's me. And so I just asked, and they were like, sure. And
we've had broadcast programs. Sorry to interrupt you. Just made me think of that. We've had broadcast programs get the football teams coaches headsets to use during basketball season. So there's creative ways you can kind of use that, or maybe your drama department has headsets and you want to borrow them, or vice versa. So great thought there.
Yeah, 100%. And so maybe that's even better justification for how to purchase something like that too. If funding is not there, say, hey, look, there's multiple uses for this. And so, yeah, getting into multicam production, this is where you start to add a lot of students to the progress, or to the program, and really the production as a whole. And so, yeah, crew to crew communication, though, that's where, like I said, 60% of our teachers that answered the poll said that crew communication was the single piece of gear that made the biggest difference in their broadcast. And that poll is actually in Future Ready Educators, if you want to join. And we actually had great discussion in the comment section on that as well.
And briefly, just go through 4 and 5, because those could be their own episodes. Yeah.
Yeah. Level four, you start adding replay. You start maybe adding a dedicated equipment spot where everything kind of stays where it is and is always plugged in. It might not be a studio, but it's, hey, this is my spot. It all stays there. Hoop and wall cams. We even start to get like hoop microphones if you want to upgrade your audio like that, where you really, March Madness just got over, and every time the ball would hit the rim, you hear a little clink, or goes through the net, you hear a little whoosh, and it just sounds awesome. That is something that is at that premium production level, and the money starts to add up real quick when you
Yeah.
start getting to 4 and 5. And then yeah, that professional studio. Marcus Shear at JCC has a professional studio, and he does use NDI, and he has a control room, so they're not in the gym; they are separate, and it's really cool. It also takes a lot of work, and he's kind of in charge of their IT infrastructure. So it's really nice for him to be able to set it up, something that is network dependent because he's the one in control. But when you start getting to this, you start having to work with a lot of other people that manage the infrastructure of your school to make it all work as well. And I mean, if you get to level 5, kudos, because it's a lot and it's the real experience for students. But even level 3, like a level 3 broadcast can look really really good if you have the right training and the right gear at that level to pull it off. You don't need all the fancy things. Like most viewers are not expecting a high school to have that either.
Okay, number 4 is kind of a fun way to kind of see where you're at as well. In addition to those questions, is to match your gear to your level. So using this guide to match which level you're at with what equipment you currently have. So level one's pretty simple, right? You've got it could be a Sony camera, it doesn't matter. You've got a tripod capture card. Um, you're at level 1, right? Level 2, you've got those. We mentioned all the different equipment at each of these levels, but just kind of maybe visually drawing out, okay, yeah, we've got this, or maybe you might have a mix of things too, but you're like, oh, maybe we're still, level 1. But it's just a great visual, even for you to go through with your administration, and for you and your students, like, hey, where do you guys want this to go? If you've got some students who are really into this, is to map that out and draw that out. Use your whiteboard, hey, and use this as a guide. This is not the end all be all for equipment. This is a guide. If you really want to get into the weeds and build this out, we do that for schools. You mentioned Metro Nashville Public Schools that we worked with last year. It took months to go through to figure out this is the system, this is the gear that they wanted to get. And so it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of thought process, especially when you're spending money on this and it's the school's money. We want to make sure we're doing it right. And so figuring out, this is just a great way for you to visualize and communicate, hey, this is where we're at. So for teachers wondering what specific gear to look at, what would you tell them about matching equipment to where they actually are, Hoosier?
Yeah, I think again, using the guide's a great place to start. Here's one of the things that we haven't had many schools not do this, but I'm waiting for the day that somebody does. If you buy a certain brand of camera,
Hmm,
stick with that brand. Do not mix and match brands.
I like that.
It makes it a lot easier to train your students because it's all like, even, so we primarily sell Canon cameras to schools, and primarily that's because a lot of photography cameras that the schools already have are Canon. If you're a Sony school, great. Jordan at Nixa, he's a Sony school, and that's fine. And that's what they use. There's nothing better or worse unless you're really technical. But the thing is, the menu stays the same. So between
Yes.
the XA11 and the XA60 and the XA70, and then even going up to Marcus's XF605s, the menu still looks the same. It still has the same. You just get more features, but you keep the same core features in the same spot. And so that's would be my biggest advice. No matter what you're doing, however you're adding it, if you pick, if you started an XA11, you better just stay with Canon, and you
Stay with
better
the
stick to
XAs.
that
Yep.
route,
Yep.
because it's just, you're going to get used to it, and then it just doesn't make sense to train students on both, when you could just easily match it up, and there's not a lot of price difference either in that.
And that leads to our last one as we wrap up, which is building a training plan for each piece of gear you add. We did this for state basketball, and I'd love for you to share just kind of how that can help your program. Like you said, having the same brand is super helpful from a training standpoint, but what else?
Yeah, when you build a training plan, especially when we were thinking about state, a lot of the equipment the students had used, but there were some pieces that students hadn't used. And so not only did we match, the practical knowledge of like, here's when you switch a shot, but we really did pair like, okay, if you're running our switcher, which we use the vMix software to do multiple cameras, here's all of the functionality of it. I think the biggest thing that we as people who teach the students what they do, the biggest thing we can do is maybe not fire hose them with all of the options, but we need to show them all of what they can do, right? Um, that's my first thing. Whenever I do something, whenever I get a new software, a new tool, I'm like, all right, what can this do? What can vMix do? And then I pass that on to our students because I want them to feel comfortable being creative. When they're in the middle of a broadcast, they know that, hey, if I hit this button, this is what it's going to do. I don't want them asking me in the middle of the broadcast because then they're not going to feel as confident. And so by giving them all of the knowledge ahead of time and training them over each piece of gear, then allows them to go and be a little bit more free in how they play. Kind of like a basketball coach, you train for all the different scenarios. Like, what happens if they throw a full court press on us? The teams that haven't practiced that, you can tell because there's usually a quick
Mm-hmm.
turnover and a score for the team on defense. Um, but yes, build a training plan. That way, when stuff happens in the field, which it will, because we're live, and that's the beauty of it, stuff happens. And I wouldn't trade like the adrenaline I get doing live productions and stuff like that. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world because it's live.
100%. Yeah.
And you don't know what happens, and if you want it to go well, you have to train for it and you have to be prepared.
Yeah. Well, awesome. There's so much more we could dive into on gear, but this is a great starting point if whatever level you're at. But just understand this: gear is not the shortcut. Systems are the shortcut. Start where you are, master that level, build the training, which we can help with, and then maybe you can go to the next piece. And we're here to help you, or the Future Ready Educators community can help you. Jordan Burns shared at Nixa. He started with a folding table and one camera. That's how I started. That's how Hoosier started. And now his students are running a multicam production with replay comms, NDI, Dante audio. And he didn't get there by buying everything at once. It was building each year. And we've got countless stories of schools doing the same thing. And that's what we want for your program, whichever level you're at. So you can download the broadcast and equipment guide, and helps you map that out from a single camera to the full production room. It's a free download, and you can go get it at strive.education/levels. And we can't wait to get into the rest of this series that we've got. We've got more episodes planned. So hope you can join us. If you have any questions on equipment, let us know, and we can help you and guide you so that you make the right purchase for your program and have the training and education built around it so your students can thrive in your student-led broadcast program. We'll see you next time on the Broadcast Ops Playbook.